Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. Lots to talk about. Stacy.
Max, one thing you can learn from history is that the elite, when everything starts to go wrong, what they always do is blame the people, right? Since 2016, we've seen, of course, the people be deemed deplorable. They are deplorable people who deserve all the stuff coming to them because of the COVID lockdowns, for example. Well, as Keiser Report has been warning, inflation is roaring. It's no longer transitory. It's almost permanent, right? Well, U.S. Treasury Secretary Yellen, consumer spending in the United States has been concentrated on goods, which has exacerbated supply chain issues significantly. So it's the consumers, the citizens, the residents of this country who are to blame for the inflation because they keep on buying things with all of their Biden bucks and all of their asset price gains. Because remember, house prices are up 20% year on year, 2 years in a row. Everybody's feeling rich and they're spending.
Right. Well, we've been talking about this inflation story now for several years because it's a disaster waiting to happen. As early as recently, 6-7 months ago, the official policy from Janet Yellen and others was that the economy was suffering from deflation. And we said that was actually a very sophist way to look at it. That was a manipulation of words. The problem was insidious and incipient and growing inflationary pressures as evidenced by the explosion in asset prices. And we said this was basically lying on behalf of the federal government. Then we entered into the transitory inflation phase that we're exiting now, but this was very predictably coming after the lies about inflation didn't work anymore. Then the real inflation hit. Now we're at another juncture where they're saying that it's really now entering a secular inflationary period, a semi-permanent inflationary period, exactly as we predicted, for a very simple reason. When you print 40 or 50% of the nation's money supply within the preceding 12 months, you get inflation. I mean, it's like 2 + 2 = 4. Janet Yellen blaming consumers for buying stuff is the kind of the height of hypocrisy, and it's the height of cognitive dissonance, and it's the height of the American empire, to be quite frank. I mean, this is the end, folks. Janet Yellen is a buffoon. Joe Biden is mentally incompetent, and Jay Powell is a crook.
Well, I think the peak was actually back in 2008 when we first started Keiser Report, 2008, 2009, and we've been covering the slow decline, and now is the sudden part. And you see everybody up to the likes of Ray Dalio, a multi-billionaire, who's also talking about the rapid decline of the U.S. and how, you need to protect yourself from the dollar declining. And in terms of this, situation that the Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, describes on the ground, like our observations just here in North Carolina is that it is like the roaring 20s. People are out there spending. Every single hour of the day is rush hour. People are out there spending, consuming, and it's wild because also like there are no workers. So it's total entropy, decay, chaos. Like everywhere you go, any supermarket, any restaurant, the post office, like there are no workers there. And there's lines out the door for every single thing you do. The dry cleaning in our area used to be 24-hour turnaround for years. Now it's 6-7 days. So because they don't have any workers. So there is a kind of chaos and entropy and just disintegration happening very rapidly.
Well, this is the Faustian bargain that really began with Reagan, the famous Reagan-Thatcher era of financial liberalization. This is when America decided to send all of its high-paying jobs and factories to China. And the message from Reagan and his subsequent presidential people is that, you in America, you can just sit home and consume. You don't need to work because we have Chinese, the cost of labor is so cheap. Everything will arrive at Walmart. And even with your minimum wage job, you're going to be able to have a flat screen TV, you get brand new Winnebago, cheap high fructose corn syrup in your 20-gallon jugs of poison, don't worry about it. And well, okay, now it's 2021, and we see the consequences of this. It's the end of an empire.
Well, we should all hope it's the end of the empire of the super imperialism, as our guest in the second half, Dr. Michael Hudson, is going to talk about. And of course, it's all based on an empire of debt and the petrodollar. So there is something that it does remind me of, because we talk about the Cantillon effect, that those closest to the money printers benefit from the 0% interest rates. That's Wall Street, that's Washington, D.C., that's San Francisco, that's anywhere, big corporations, AAA rated corporations. And then it trickles down. By the time it gets to the deplorable masses, it's like got 15 to 20% interest rates. But you have that on a global scale too. So the interesting thing and the observation I'm making of what I've seen, where everybody has Biden bucks and stock prices and house prices are at way all-time highs. In some cities, like it's twice as high, the property prices, as it was in the last peak of the last bubble, just from 10 years ago. So it's kind of like this, we have a Saudi system whereby Saudi Arabia has 7,000 princes and all the royal families, and the oil produced support those families, but not much else happening in the economy. Whereas we have the same sort of situation here, where we have like 300 million, well, say 250 million Saudi princes, American princes and princesses, and 50 million deplorable cis white males who are MAGA and should be, unloading the goods for us. Go do it. Go do your job and deliver our goods for us.
Yeah, we have a kind of a system where the ability to print money means that folks have given up trying to be productive or work for a living, right? They just need to beg the government for more money. This has been tried a few times before in communist China, communist Soviet Union, in other communist strongholds, and it's never worked. So I don't see, as just people who have at least some modicum of intelligence trying to mimic failed system of socialism in the past by recreating it here in America, it doesn't seem, that's the end of empire.
Well, yeah, and it's that princeling system that I'm just saying, like, when the elite don't even work, they don't do anything, they're out all day consuming and hanging out, having coffee and cocktails. The point is, like, if you call the people deplorable, if you throw brioche at them, if you insult all day long your major creditor, and the country like China that provides all of these goods that Janet Yellen says we're trying to consume, is like, at a certain point, like they reflect back to you and show you the mirror. Like, no, you're the one that's the bum. You're the one that's not paying for your goods. And I would talk about paying for your goods. Here is a tweet from the president of El Salvador himself, and he's basically quoting Keiser Report in Espanol. I'll try to say it in Espanol because he tweets in Espanol. El Salvador podrá saldar absolutamente toda su deuda externa con los bonos Bitcoin. He's quoting that you had said on a recent interview on Keiser Report that El Salvador is going to pay off all of these debts to this bad debtor nation of the United States with these Bitcoin bonds.
Yeah, they've got external debt, approximately 20 billion, let's call it, which is now approaching approximately, let's call it 90% of GDP. Well, it took a big jump in the last couple of years. Volcano bonds, Bitcoin-backed volcano bonds, are a path toward paying down virtually all that debt. So I'm kind of making it my mission when I get back into El Salvador in the next couple of months. We'll be there. The goal will be to work on this plan of eliminating El Salvadorian debt within 10 years.
Because he's a Bitcoiner and Bitcoin is honest money, and we pay our debts, and this is honest money, unlike the dishonest money of the other system where debts are never paid and they're just rolled over for decades and decades. And I'll show you that in this next tweet in the headline, because obviously El Salvador is on a dollar standard and now a Bitcoin standard. So their debts are in dollar, they can't print it. But look what happens in Europe. Taper what? ECB balance sheet keeps rising despite rampant inflation. Total assets have risen by another 14.7 billion euros in the past week to hit fresh all-time highs at 8.457 trillion. ECB balance sheet now equals 81.2% of Eurozone GDP versus Fed's 37.4%, Bank of England's 42%, and the Bank of Japan's 134.6%. That's the bum lifestyle I'm telling you about. They're never going to pay their debts. They have no intentions of paying their debts. And they're forcing basically the deplorable 99% at the bottom to pay their debts through the inflation.
Right. And they have one huge point of failure, and that is energy cost, because all that money printing is driving up the energy costs. And it's going to force Russia into the EU. And for that to happen, NATO and the American military has got to exit Germany.
Well,
okay, I call it here first. You say I'm crazy, but that's what I'm calling.
Well, so the energy costs, food cost, lumber cost, commodity cost, living cost, housing cost, health costs, all of those costs are going up. And like I said at the top of the show, the elite will blame the bottom. They've already started to blame everybody else for every single cost going up. In the case of oil, it's Russia, it's Saudi Arabia, it's their fault. Even though just 2 years ago, we were bragging that we're the #1 oil producer in the world. And so suddenly, what, like everybody else is to blame but us? Like, where's our oil? Like, they're always going to blame everybody else. And that's just the end of super imperialism.
Well, energy is life. Everything rests on top of a foundation of energy. And that's the primary commodity of life. And that will fundamentally change. I mean, look at the agricultural industry. It's all based on petrochemical fertilizers. That's all based on energy. So you can't have food without petrochemicals, without energy. You can't have anything related to it. So it's what's going to happen. And we're in an interesting cyclical years of change, and all the players are going to realign and new alliances. And the big winner will be, of course, Bitcoin. And within the winners of the winners will be El Salvador is going to emerge as leading the entire world.
Because they have the energy of the young population, and they have the energy, the eternal, nonstop energy of the volcano bonds, and Max Keiser heading that way.
I'm excited. I'm going to definitely become a semi-professional surfer. Maybe not. Anyway, we're going to take a break. When we come back, much more coming your way. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Dr. Michael Hudson. He's out with an updated and expanded third edition of his classic, Super Imperialism, the Economic Strategy of the American Empire. Welcome back, Dr. Hudson.
Well, it's good to be back, Max.
Michael, your book, Super Imperialism, has become a big hit in the Bitcoin community. Were you aware of that, and why is that?
The community you're talking about looked at it as a how to do it book. They really didn't expect when America went off gold, they thought, this is how we've controlled the world since 1945. Our gold means that we can tell other countries what to do. We can be the creditor and buy out their property. Once the Vietnam War and foreign military spending pushed the U.S. into deficit beginning in 1951, the gold cover of the dollar was ended. And in Washington, they were all worried, how are we going to express our diplomacy when we don't have any dollars to do it? And much to their surprise, when you're going off gold, confronted the foreign central banks with a problem. What were they going to do with all these dollars that the U.S. was throwing off by running a trade deficit, by spending abroad, by buying out foreign companies? They found they really couldn't do anything but recycle all these dollars to the United States by buying treasury bonds, because if they didn't recycle these dollars, their currency would go up and their exports would be priced out of the market. So my book explained how going off gold actually created a new form of international exploitation. And Herman Kahn at a meeting of Drexel Burnham said, my God, you've shown this is the biggest ripoff in history. This is great. Will you come and join me at the Hudson Institute? He told me the CIA and the State Department were the biggest buyers of super imperialism, and the Hudson Institute got an $85,000 grant for me to explain to the Treasury Department how the United States was getting a free ride, exploiting the rest of the world and making other countries pay for the military spending that was surrounding the rest of the world with military bases and taking off.
You are not for a gold standard, however.
I'm not for a gold standard, but gold is the only thing that that countries have been able to agree upon for the last few thousand years, except for silver. If you ask countries, what are you going to buy? Well, countries don't. How are you going to keep your savings? Well, countries don't want to save in the form of lending money to the U.S. Treasury and getting Treasury bonds, because the United States, if it doesn't like the holders, can just wipe out their holdings or freeze them. And in any case, there's no way that these dollars of U.S. debt are ever going to be repaid. Gold is something that everybody's already used to dealing with, and so I do expect that China, Russia, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and other countries are going to realize that if you're not going to hold dollars, if you're going to de-dollarize, then gold is the path of least resistance because it's familiar.
So the folks who are behind super imperialism, the US dollar-led global hegemony, they don't like for people or for countries to have excess savings, right?
Only if they invest their savings in treasury bonds or do what the OPEC countries did. They would send their oil earnings by buying U.S. stocks, U.S. bonds, or when Japan had its savings before the Plaza Accord. It spent all its money on real estate that went bust, like Rockefeller Center that they lost $1 billion on, or prestige golf courses. So the question is, they don't want other countries to have savings that are not under the U.S. control. They don't want other countries to be independent.
And part of that dollar hegemony and keeping the U.S. dollar as world reserve currency and control over various global economies is the ability to inflate that dollar supply, correct?
You can just print it electronically. There's no limit as to how many dollars. And the important thing is that you can print dollars and it's for free. If you buy gold, you actually have to produce something to get the revenue to spend on the gold. But the United States can simply print the dollars either in paper or electronically and essentially buy up foreign resources or buy imports or spend on military operations.
So a moment ago, when I mentioned that the Bitcoin community has embraced your book, Super Imperialism, your comment was that they see it as a how-to book. What did you mean by that?
That meant that they could see the problems of buying, of dollarization, the problems of buying, keeping your savings in US dollars led other countries to look for an alternative. And the Bitcoin community hopes that one alternative will be what Ecuador has done and save in the form of Bitcoin. That de-dollarization is going to create a market for non-dollar assets, either gold or Bitcoin or whatever. I don't see other countries buying Bitcoin because of the huge volume of savings that foreign central banks have.
So El Salvador has made Bitcoin legal tender, and they are also committed to adding it to their strategic reserves. And they're also going to be mining Bitcoin, converting virtually free geothermal energy or volcanic energy. But we are seeing in the region, Dr. Hudson, a contagion, if you will, other countries in the Central America. And this is typically the backyard of American imperialism for sure. They are looking to mimic El Salvador and adopt a Bitcoin standard, make Bitcoin legal. They have, of course, as you point out, a huge reserve of assets. But the thing about the Bitcoin price, like any free market, it can simply make that adjustment and the price would go higher. There's no limit to how many of the $100 trillion, let's say, in the global bond market could be absorbed by Bitcoin, right?
Yep, that's the question.
Have you had a change of heart? Because the last time we spoke about Bitcoin, you seemed to be ambivalent about it, if not slightly negative. Has there been a change in your thinking?
No, I'm, if anything, even more negative than before. The reason that Central American countries can think of Bitcoin is if they're going to save their money not in dollars, what can they do in a way that does not offend the United States? Because we're talking about client oligarchies, basically. They are remaining in power only at under U.S. support. So they can't really buy gold because that would be viewed as doing what China and Russia and other countries that are not friendly to the United States are doing. So the United States is quite happy to see them invest in Bitcoin. For one thing, as this bids up the price of Bitcoin, it enables Wall Street speculators to make a large amount of money. And at some point, if these countries ever spend the Bitcoin, it'll push it way down and they'll end up losing their money. And the United States is not averse to other countries losing their savings. It reduces their ability to be independent.
Well, unlike any other asset in history, with Bitcoin, it is in fact, without any equivocation, unconfiscatable. The United States, if they sent in the Marine Corps, they sent in the Pentagon, could not take El Salvador's Bitcoin away from them. And they don't need to sell Bitcoin ever. They can simply loan it out and use it as a reserve to finance, for example, Bitcoin City, which is a project that they have in mind. They're building hospitals using this as a strategic reserve. The IMF is against them embracing Bitcoin because it puts the IMF out of business. And the very thing you talk about in super imperialism about U.S. institutions using debt as a weapon. I don't see how this is going to be seen favorable by the super imperialists over at the IMF or the central banks around the world. There's a huge disconnect for me. Can you explain more? What am I missing?
Well, at least it's the least unfavorable. What else are countries going to do apart from buying gold, apart from buying treasury securities? What on earth? And they're not able to buy U.S. businesses because you know what happened to Venezuela when Venezuela tried that. There's really not much choice for them to do, and buying Bitcoin is not a threat to U.S. Hegemony. It's something independent. It's just a different game. It does use a lot of energy, as you pointed out. That's a huge. It does not it's not environmentally conservationalist. I think the U.S. thinks, well, there could be worse things than Bitcoin.
All right, just to be clear, the geothermal energy that El Salvador will be using to mine Bitcoin is, in fact, stranded energy or energy that's not being used. It's ecologically inert. It has no ecological footprint whatsoever. As a matter of fact, it pulls away from those industries that cause ecological problems. Also in El Salvador, the economy is set to grow and their carbon footprint is set to decline. Again, that goes against those people that have been supporting these white elephant projects on climate change. We're finding out, for example, in Great Britain, that the wind energy projects that they've built over the last 20 years are becoming useless because something like less than 10% utilization last year, because we have a collapse of actually the wind flows around the world due to the incredible pollution that generates by 8 billion people around the world. So again, help me understand, here's Hillary Clinton. She says that Bitcoin threatens the role of the dollar as reserve currency. The Biden administration warned that Bitcoin made sanctions difficult to apply to nations like Iran. Okay? You can do transactions with Iran and the U.S. can't stop it. You can save your wealth in Bitcoin and the U.S. can't stop it. I really don't understand your point in terms of this is something that the U.S. would encourage. It defunds the dollar. It's demonetizing gold. Gold is being sold and being channeled into Bitcoin. It's demonetizing gold. It's demonetizing the dollar. How can that be good for the U.S. dollar hegemony, Dr. Michael Hudson?
Because the one thing the United States fears more than anything else is losing, as other countries going on to gold, is losing the power that the U.S. gold stock still has, and of joining, basically, going on gold would make them part of the China, Russia, Iran, the socialist countries' alternative. And anything that is not gold is less of a structural threat. The United States isn't really worried about.
Excuse me for interrupting, but that's categorically false. Anything that's not gold, in this case with Bitcoin, by demonetizing gold, is not only is it a threat, but it's an extinction event. This will put an extinction event on U.S. dollar hegemony because it's a 100% pure monetary signal, whereas gold at most might be 80 or 90% monetary signal. This is 100% monetary. This is kryptonite to America's Superman. This is our vulnerability, Dr. Michael Hudson. I mean, you're getting very close to. We got to carry this over to part 2. That's what we're going to do. But for now, thanks for being on Keiser Report.
Good to be here.
All right, and that's going to do it for this part of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. Special guest, Dr. Michael Hudson. He's out with the 3rd edition of the classic Super Imperialism. It's a huge hit. Until next time, bye, y'all.